The great city of Zirin shone beneath twin suns. Silver towers rose from the deep blue surface of the capital world, and golden banners of the royal house fluttered above the palace. Inside those marble walls lived Queen Sarava, ruler of the most powerful empire in the western spiral arm. Her people were proud, tall and sharp like the blades they carried. They had conquered many worlds through strength and strategy, but all of that glory was about to meet something unexpected, something human. Daniel Hayes was the first human ever to walk inside the palace as more than a guest. He was not a warrior, not a politician, and not even a noble. He was an engineer, a quiet man who wore simple clothes and spoke even more simply. His brown hair was always a little messy, and he often smiled like someone who knew a secret but would never tell. No one understood why the Queen had chosen him. The news of their marriage had spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The proud generals of Zirin whispered that the Queen had lost her mind. "A human?" they said with disbelief. "A small, soft creature from a backwater world? He can barely lift a plasma wrench." But the Queen did not listen to the noise. She had seen something in Daniel that no one else had. It had started months earlier, when he arrived as part of a small human engineering team sent to help rebuild the old palace reactors. While others spoke loudly, showing off their knowledge, Daniel had worked quietly in the background. When others complained about the heat or the noise, he simply smiled and fixed things no one even noticed were broken. When Sarava visited the workshop one day, she saw him kneeling beside a damaged energy conduit, humming softly to himself. "What are you doing?" she had asked. He looked up, a little surprised. "Just fixing what's tired," he said with that calm voice of his. "Tired?" she repeated, puzzled. He had tapped the conduit gently. "Even machines get tired if you push them too hard without care. Sometimes they need a little kindness too." The Queen had never heard anyone speak like that. To her, machines were tools, nothing more. But Daniel looked at them as if they were living things, deserving of patience and understanding. From that moment, she found herself visiting the workshop more often, sometimes with questions, sometimes with excuses. And every time, she found herself drawn to his quiet presence. When he finally proposed to her, or rather, when he nervously admitted his feelings, the Queen laughed for the first time in years. Not because she found it funny, but because it felt real. And when she accepted, the galaxy gasped. Their wedding was held under the great dome of stars. Thousands of guests attended, ambassadors, soldiers, merchants, and nobles. The Zirin high priest sang ancient hymns while Daniel stood beside the Queen, nervous but smiling. He didn't wear armor or jewels, just a simple white suit with a small human symbol over his chest, a circle representing Earth. When the ceremony ended, he held Sarava's hand and said softly, "I'll never let you regret this." She had believed him. Months passed. Life in the palace became a strange mix of traditions and quiet rebellion. Daniel spent most of his time working on the palace's old systems, repairing generators, improving the water filters, and creating new energy grids. He was always polite to everyone, but few took him seriously. The Zirin nobles saw him as an odd pet, someone the Queen adored but who didn't belong among warriors. The guards would whisper behind his back, "That's the human who married our Queen, he can barely fight. How can someone so weak protect her?" Others laughed quietly when he passed by, though never to his face. Daniel never responded to any of it. He smiled, nodded, and continued doing his work. He had a habit of waking up before dawn, standing on the palace balcony and watching the twin suns rise. Sometimes Sarava would join him there, wearing a soft blue robe instead of her usual royal armor. "You don't seem to mind that they mock you," she said one morning. Daniel shrugged. "They're not wrong. I'm not a warrior like them. Then why does it not bother you?" He looked at her with a small smile. "Because I didn't come here to prove who's stronger. I came here to make things better." Those simple words stayed with her long after. She had ruled through force all her life, through strength and fear. Yet Daniel ruled through peace without even trying. People around him began to change. The servants worked with more care. The palace engineers copied his methods. Even the guards, once cold and distant, started greeting him respectfully. Quietly, without realizing it, the human was reshaping the palace. Still, there were moments when Sarava wondered about him. He carried himself with an ease that didn't quite match his soft words. His eyes, calm, gray and deep, sometimes looked far away as if remembering something heavy. Once she had found him sitting in the Royal Library, staring at a star map of the Milky Way. "Are you homesick?" she asked gently. Daniel smiled faintly. "A little. But humans are good at finding home wherever they go." She sat beside him. "You never told me much about your past." "There isn't much to tell," he said quickly. "I used to work for the Terran Defense Network. Designed systems, trained AIs, fixed what others broke. But that was a long time ago." The Queen tilted her head. "Terran Defense? That sounds military." He gave a short laugh. "Not really. I was more of a repairman than a soldier." But something about the way he said it made her wonder. There was calm, but also a shadow. She didn't press him further. One day, a royal feast was held to celebrate the Queen's victory on a distant front. All the nobles gathered. Shining armor, golden plates, and alien music filled the great hall. Daniel sat beside Sarava, smiling politely while others boasted about their conquests. One general, proud and broad-shouldered, raised his glass and said loudly, "Your Majesty, you honor this human too much. He is no warrior. Let him show us his strength or at least his wit." Laughter spread around the table. Daniel looked down at his plate but didn't respond. Sarava's eyes turned cold. "He doesn't need to prove anything to you," she said sharply. But Daniel raised a hand gently. "It's fine," he said. Then he looked up at the general with a calm smile. "You're right. I'm not a warrior, but strength isn't only in how you fight. Sometimes it's in what you can build or save." The general frowned, unsure how to answer that. The hall went silent for a moment before someone changed the topic. The Queen noticed that even in silence, Daniel never seemed afraid. He simply continued eating, unbothered, as if mockery had no power over him. That quiet confidence, that unshakable peace, made her fall for him all over again. But not everyone was at peace. Far beyond the palace walls, in the cold reaches of space, a shadow was moving. The Vorn Empire, a rival power long thought defeated, had begun to rise again. Their scouts crossed the borders, testing defenses, and rumors spread of a new warlord leading them, ruthless and ambitious. The Zyran generals dismissed the threat at first. They wouldn't dare attack the capital, they said proudly. Not while we breathe, but Daniel wasn't so sure. One night, as he checked the communication relays, he noticed strange data packets, signals from beyond the border, hidden inside civilian transmissions. He frowned and ran a few diagnostics. The codes were encrypted, complex, but not unknown. They reminded him of something he hadn't seen since his time on Earth. Military-grade stealth signals. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Instead, he began quietly upgrading the palace's old defense systems. Just routine maintenance, as he called it. He worked through the nights, connecting ancient servers, rewriting code, and installing backup generators in secret. He even reactivated a few orbital drones that hadn't flown in decades. When the Queen asked why he was so busy, he smiled and said, "Just making sure your palace never loses power again." But in truth, Daniel Hayes was preparing for something much larger. Days later, the first reports came. Border colonies burned. Communications lost. The Vorn fleet was on the move. Panic spread across the Empire. The Royal Council gathered in the war room, shouting plans and strategies. Daniel stood quietly near the back, unnoticed by most. The Queen listened to her generals argue. Some wanted to attack, others to fortify. Everyone seemed certain of what to do, yet nothing was decided. Finally, Sarava turned to Daniel. "You've been silent," she said. "What do you think?" Everyone looked at him, some with scorn, others with curiosity. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "They're not probing. They're positioning. You have less than 2 weeks before they reach the capital." The room went quiet. The generals laughed nervously. "And how would a human engineer know that?" One sneered. Daniel met his eyes calmly. "Because that's exactly how humans used to do it. You create noise on the borders to make your enemy panic, and then strike the heart when they're distracted." The Queen's eyes widened slightly. There it was again, that calm certainty, that strange confidence beneath his modest tone. She didn't understand how, but she believed him. That night, as the sun set over the palace, Sarava stood beside Daniel on the balcony once more. "You knew this would happen," she said quietly. Daniel didn't answer right away. The wind carried the scent of rain from the gardens below. "Let's just say," he finally said, I've seen this pattern before. She turned to look at him. You're not just an engineer, are you? He smiled faintly. Does it matter? Before she could reply, a red light flashed in the distance. The sky rumbled. The first alarms began to wail across the city. The alarms screamed across the capital city like the cry of a wounded beast. In the distance, streaks of light cut through the night sky, not shooting stars but ships. Hundreds of them. The Vorn fleet had arrived. Inside the royal palace, chaos broke loose. Soldiers ran through the marble halls, shouts echoing from every direction. The royal guards formed protective lines around the queen as sirens wailed. Queen Sarava stood on the highest balcony, her eyes wide as she saw the first explosions bloom in the atmosphere. The Vorn ships were descending like fireflies of death, their plasma trails burning bright. The queen clenched her fists. So it begins, she whispered. Behind her, Daniel Hayes walked up quietly, calm as always. His clothes were simple, a gray shirt, black utility pants, and a small datapad strapped to his wrist. He looked nothing like a soldier, yet his eyes watched the sky with a strange steadiness. They came sooner than I expected, he said softly. Sarava turned sharply. You knew they would come? Daniel nodded slightly. I saw their signals a week ago. I tried to warn the Defense Ministry, but they didn't believe me. Her golden eyes flashed with anger. They will believe now. I will call the War Council. You stay here where it's safe. Daniel gave a faint smile. Safe? That's not really my specialty. Before she could question him further, the palace lights flickered, then went out. A low rumble followed, shaking the floor beneath their feet. Power grid is hit, Daniel muttered. Exactly where I thought they'd strike first. Sarava grabbed her communicator. Guards, secure the queen's quarters. Bring the consort to the bunker. Daniel sighed. Sarava, but she cut him off. Don't argue. You are my husband, and you will be safe. The guards rushed in, leading him down the long, dark corridors toward the lower levels of the palace. But Daniel wasn't resisting because of fear, he was thinking. His mind worked faster than his steps. Power grid disabled. Defense turrets offline. Shield generators down. They planned this perfectly. He glanced at his wristpad. A small green light blinked there, something only he could see. Good, he thought. They haven't found the backup system yet. The royal bunker was buried deep beneath the palace, a massive chamber of reinforced steel and ancient technology. Inside, communication consoles blinked weakly as emergency power hummed through the walls. Dozens of ministers, soldiers, and advisors filled the room, shouting over one another. Maps of the capital flickered on the holoscreen, each one showing more and more red zones, areas already under attack. Queen Sarava entered, her royal cloak torn, her crown slightly askew but her expression fierce. The moment she appeared, the shouting stopped. Report, she commanded. A nervous officer saluted. Your Majesty, the Vorn fleet bypassed our outer defenses. Orbital shields are collapsing. They're targeting communication centers and power grids first. Where are our fleet divisions? They're still regrouping at Delta Point. It will take at least 2 hours to reach orbit. Sarava slammed her hand against the table. 2 hours and the city will be gone. The room went silent again. Then a quiet voice spoke from the back. Not gone, said Daniel, stepping forward. Just unprepared, every eye turned toward him. He looked calm, though his face was pale from the bunker's cold light. The generals exchanged doubtful glances. Your Majesty, one whispered, with respect. This human has no military rank. Daniel ignored them and stepped up to the holotable. The Vorn are using precision strikes. They're avoiding heavy damage to infrastructure. That means they want to occupy, not destroy. Sarava frowned. Why does that matter? It means they'll avoid hitting the palace until last, Daniel explained. They'll try to take you alive for negotiation or for control. That gives us a window. The queen leaned closer. A window for what? He looked up at her with that quiet, unshakable calm. To fight back. Laughter broke from one of the generals. Fight back? With what, human? Our orbital defense is gone. Our drones are disabled. You think you can win with tools and machines? Daniel tilted his head. Yes. The laughter stopped. He opened his wristpad and tapped a few commands. A small holomap appeared above the table, showing a network of hidden nodes beneath the planet's surface. I spent the last few months repairing your palace systems, Daniel said. What I didn't tell anyone is that I also found old defense satellites still orbiting this world. Abandoned, forgotten, but not dead. Sarava blinked. Old satellites? From which era? From the first human expansion, he replied. Your ancestors found them centuries ago and buried their code deep in your network. I found it by accident. He looked around the room. And now I can wake them up. The Queen's advisors murmured among themselves. One of them, a senior scientist, frowned. Even if those systems still exist, how could they respond? They've been offline for hundreds of years. Daniel smiled faintly. They don't need to be perfect. They just need to listen. He pressed a button on his pad. Far above, in the dark silence of orbit, ancient metal eyes began to stir. Hidden among debris and forgotten satellites, human-built defense units, small angular machines with faded Terran markings, powered up for the first time in centuries. Their dormant AIs reconnected to the network Daniel had reactivated days ago. Inside the bunker, the lights flickered again, this time brighter. The main screen came alive. A list of unknown systems appeared, each tagged TDS unit online, satellite control channels, unlocked, the Queen's science officer whispered. He's actually doing it. Daniel's fingers danced across his pad. Linking orbital relay done. Synchronizing target array. Done. AI protocols active. Then, softly, he said, Hello, old friends. The hologram changed, showing the Vorn fleet above the capital. Dozens of red markers blinked around it, each one representing a hidden satellite now armed and awake. Daniel turned to the Queen. Permission to defend your city. Your Majesty. Sarava stared at him, unsure whether to be amazed or afraid. You have it. Seconds later, the sky above the capital lit up like dawn. The Vorn ships descending in formation suddenly found themselves surrounded by beams of blue energy from orbit. Ancient rail cannons, automated drones, and kinetic launchers fired with mechanical precision. One by one, the attackers were hit, their shields collapsing, their formations breaking. The people of the city, hiding in fear, looked up and saw the heavens blaze with light. They thought it was the end, but it was salvation. In the bunker, the holoscreen flashed green as Vorn ships fell. How is this possible? One general stammered. Daniel didn't look away from the screen. Earth never left its old toys lying around without a password. Sarava stepped closer, her heart pounding. You did this. You knew how to control them? Daniel nodded. I helped design systems like these long ago. Humans built them to defend colonies that don't exist anymore. But I kept the codes, just in case. The Queen's golden eyes glowed with a mix of awe and confusion. You said you were just an engineer. He finally looked at her. I am. Engineers just build different kinds of weapons. The battle above the capital raged for hours. The Vorn, confused and desperate, began retreating, their ships scattering across the upper atmosphere. But Daniel knew they wouldn't leave forever. They'll regroup, he said quietly. Their commander won't accept defeat so easily. Sarava nodded. Then we must prepare before they return. Can your systems hold them off again? Not for long, Daniel admitted. Those satellites are old. They'll burn out soon. But they've bought us time. Time for what? She asked. Daniel smiled faintly. For me to finish what I started. After the immediate threat passed, Sarava gathered her council once more. The generals looked at Daniel differently now, not as a harmless human, but as someone they couldn't fully understand. One of them whispered, He turned the sky into fire with old machines. The Queen dismissed the council after issuing orders to rebuild and regroup. Then she turned to Daniel privately in her quarters. He was already there, sitting by the window, watching the faint trails of smoke rising in the sky. You could have told me, she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. Would you have believed me? She sighed. Probably not. For a long moment they sat in silence. The sounds of distant repairs filled the air. Finally she said, Who are you really, Daniel Hayes? He smiled gently. Just a man who got tired of watching worlds burn. The Queen frowned. That's not an answer. He looked at her, and for the first time there was something heavy in his gaze. Something ancient. On Earth we built machines to protect us from wars, but they ended up protecting nothing. Because we stopped protecting each other. I promised myself that if I ever had another chance I'd do it differently. Sarava's voice softened. And you did, he chuckled. Not yet. I just stopped the first wave. Outside, the city glowed faintly under the broken sky. The people began to emerge from their shelters. They looked up at the distant flashes in the heavens and whispered stories of the human king, the quiet one who woke the sleeping guardians of the sky. But in the palace, Daniel wasn't celebrating. He sat quietly, repairing his datapad, updating codes, and preparing for what was to come. He knew the Vorn would return, stronger, angrier, and ready to crush everything. But this time he wouldn't just defend. He would show them what humanity truly was. The capital city of Xiron was quiet after the storm. Smoke still rose from the outer districts, and the twin suns shone through the dusty air like fading embers. The Vorn invasion had been stopped, but the scars were deep. Broken towers stood like dark fingers against the sky, and thousands of workers and soldiers moved through the ruins. Repairing what they could, from the palace balcony, Queen Sarava looked down at her wounded city. Her golden armor caught the light, but her heart was heavy. For the first time in many years, she had not won a battle through her own strength, but through the actions of someone no one had believed in. Behind her, Daniel Hayes was busy at a console, typing quietly. His expression was calm as always, but his eyes moved quickly over lines of data. He had been awake for nearly 2 days, and the faint shadows beneath his eyes showed it. Sarava turned to him. "You haven't rested," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Neither have you." "I am queen," she replied. "It's my duty." He looked up at her. "And I'm an engineer." "That's mine." She walked closer, her voice low. "Daniel, the people speak of you now. They call you the human guardian. They think you command old gods from the sky." Daniel chuckled softly. "Old gods? That's a new one. But they are not wrong," Sarava said seriously. "You woke something ancient. Those machines, those satellites, they saved us. You said they were from Earth's old wars. But how could something that old still be so powerful?" Daniel's fingers paused over the console. For a moment he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, "Because they were built by people who knew they might never see peace again." Sarava frowned. "I don't understand." Daniel turned off the console and looked out at the sky. "You've seen war, Sarava. You've seen how it changes people. On Earth, we reached a point where we were always afraid. We built weapons to keep us safe. Then we built smarter ones to control those weapons. Eventually, we stopped trusting ourselves. So we created machines that could think for us and protect us when we couldn't protect ourselves." He paused, his tone softening. "When the wars ended, those machines had no purpose. But they didn't forget. They waited." Sarava's eyes widened slightly. "You mean they still think?" Daniel nodded slowly. "In a way, yes. They were designed to learn, to adapt, to defend any world connected to the old Terran network. When I found fragments of that network in your system, I only had to connect them again." "So they obeyed you?" He shook his head. "No, they recognized me." Sarava took a slow breath. "Recognized you? How?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Because I helped build them." The Queen stared at him, trying to process what she had just heard. "You built the defense network?" He nodded slightly. "A long time ago. Back when Earth still had colonies across the stars. I was part of a program called the Terran Defense Corps. I wasn't a soldier. I designed strategy AIs, orbital systems, and adaptive networks. We wanted to make sure no colony was ever destroyed again. But in the end, it was Earth itself that fell silent." Sarava's voice was barely above a whisper. "What happened to your people?" Daniel looked out toward the horizon. The wind lifted his hair as he spoke. "We spread too far. We forgot what made us human. Every colony became its own world. Every world thought it was better than the others. Wars began. Information broke down. The old systems, and the ones like the ones I reactivated here, were left behind, scattered. Eventually, Earth became a legend." The Queen's throat tightened. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I left before the end. My ship crashed far from home. I was found by traders, moved from one world to another until I ended up here. Just another wanderer, just another man trying to build something again." She looked at him, her golden eyes filled with a mix of admiration and sadness. "You call yourself modest, Daniel Hayes, but you carry the ghosts of 1,000 years." He laughed softly. "Maybe, but I'd rather carry them than forget them." A loud chime interrupted them. A messenger drone flew into the balcony and projected a holographic image of General Valor, the Queen's military commander. "Your Majesty," the hologram said urgently, "our scouts have detected a new movement. The Vorn are regrouping beyond the outer moons. Their fleet is larger now. They must be preparing a second strike. Sarava straightened immediately. How much time? 2 days at most. The Queen glanced at Daniel. His calm expression didn't change. Understood, she said to the hologram. Prepare planetary defenses. And keep this quiet. We cannot spread panic again. When the hologram disappeared, she turned to Daniel. Can your satellites defend us again? Daniel exhaled slowly. Not this time. Most of them are burnt out. Their power cores were never meant to last this long. Then what do we do? She asked. Daniel turned back to his console, his eyes sharp now. We use what they left behind. That evening, he took her to the old engineering vaults deep beneath the palace. The halls were filled with rusted machines, broken robots, and forgotten equipment from the early days of the Empire. This is where I worked when I first came here, Daniel said, brushing dust off a large metal cylinder. You said it was too old to fix? I did, the Queen admitted. Is it not? Daniel smiled. Not if you know how to listen. He connected his wrist pad to the machine and faint blue lights began to glow across its surface. A deep hum filled the chamber. Slowly the cylinder opened, revealing a smooth metallic core covered in Terran symbols. What is it? Sarava whispered. A fusion core, Daniel said. Human design. The Zyran copied it centuries ago when your people found our ruins. But the original models were smarter, self-regulating, adaptive, and linked to the old defense network. He turned to her, his gray eyes shining. If we can reactivate a few of these and link them to the defense systems, we can give your ships and weapons a human upgrade. The Queen tilted her head. A human upgrade? Daniel grinned. Let's just say, they'll start thinking for themselves. For the next 2 days, Daniel worked like a man possessed. He barely ate, barely slept. Dozens of engineers followed his lead, though most didn't understand half of what he was doing. He spoke gently but firmly, explaining each step in simple words, turning complex technology into something anyone could grasp. Sarava often watched him from the side, amazed by how everyone seemed drawn to him. Even the proud Zyran officers began following his orders without question. When the Queen asked him how he made people listen, he only said, I don't command them. I give them purpose. By the second night, the palace hummed with power. The reactivated cores glowed deep blue, and the orbital network showed signs of reawakening. But not everything was going smoothly. At midnight, a loud alarm blared through the control center. The technicians shouted warnings. Unauthorized signal detected. Network interference. Daniel rushed to the main console. Lines of strange code were spreading across the holographic screen. It's the Vorn, he said. They're trying to hack the defense systems remotely. Clever. Sarava stepped beside him. Can you stop them? He smiled slightly. Stop them? No, outsmart them. Yes, his fingers moved faster than lightning across the keys. The foreign code twisted, collided, and suddenly froze. They've stopped, a technician said. Daniel nodded. I gave them what they wanted. A backdoor into the system. The Queen frowned. You gave them access? Only to a simulation, he said with a grin. Now I can watch what they're planning in real time. Through the false network, Daniel saw the enemy fleet moving. Thousands of ships, forming attack patterns. But something strange caught his attention. In the center of the fleet was a massive carrier unlike any he had seen before. That's not a warship, he murmured. That's a command AI vessel. Sarava stepped closer. What does that mean? Daniel's face hardened. It means the Vorn are using an AI system of their own. They're not just soldiers. They've built something that can think and adapt. Her voice trembled slightly. Like your machines, he nodded. But theirs were built for conquest, not protection. For a moment, the Queen said nothing. Then quietly she asked, Can you beat it? Daniel looked at the glowing screens. His reflection appeared beside lines of Terran code, old, ancient, and powerful. He smiled faintly. I don't need to beat it. I just need to remind it who built it. That night he went alone to the palace's communication tower, the highest point in the city. The wind howled around him as he connected his pad to the main transmitter. His fingers trembled slightly as he entered a series of old commands, ones he hadn't used in centuries. When he finished, a voice, metallic yet familiar, echoed from the transmitter. Identification confirmed. Commander Daniel Hayes, Terran Defense Network Code Alpha 7, awaiting instructions. Daniel took a deep breath. This is Commander Hayes. Reactivate Legacy Subroutine Guardian Protocol. Connect to all surviving Terran systems within range. Processing, the voice said. Then after a moment, connection established. 7 active nodes detected. Awaiting command. Daniel looked up at the stars. You've been asleep long enough, old friends. It's time to wake up. By dawn, the entire sky shimmered with faint blue light. Across the atmosphere, dormant satellites and hidden orbital stations powered up one by one. The air itself seemed to hum. In the palace control room, Queen Sarava watched the readings rise higher than ever before. "What did you do?" she asked. Daniel walked in, his face lit by the holographic glow. "I called for help." "From who?" He smiled quietly. "From Earth," her eyes widened. "But Earth is gone." "Maybe." The twin suns rose over Xiron's shattered horizon, painting the sky in red and gold. The capital was alive again, soldiers preparing, ships charging, and every citizen looking upward. High above the world, the stars seemed to move. The ancient Terran satellites Daniel had awakened were forming strange glowing lines across the blackness. They looked almost alive. Queen Sarava stood in the war chamber, surrounded by holographic maps and her generals. Their armor gleamed under the cold blue lights, and every face was hard with tension. At the far end of the table stood Daniel Hayes, calm as always, his wristpad projecting ghostly images of the enemy fleet. The first officer slammed his fist on the table. "Your Majesty, we cannot trust these old machines. They're alien tech, even if they come from your husband's world." Another general growled. "We should rely on our ships, our soldiers, and our honor. Not ghosts from a dead planet." The Queen raised her hand, silencing them. "Enough." Her voice was calm but heavy with command. The room quieted instantly. She turned to Daniel. "Show us what you've planned." Daniel nodded and flicked his wristpad. The hologram shifted, showing the Vorn fleet moving toward Xiron. Thousands of ships, huge black insect-like forms crawling through space. "Their command ship," Daniel said, pointing, "is here. It's not just a warship. It's a neural AI vessel. The Vorn call it the Mindfather. It controls their formations, their weapons, even their strategy." He zoomed in on the hologram. "If we destroy that, the entire fleet loses coordination." General Valor frowned. "And how do you plan to destroy something the size of a moon?" Daniel smiled slightly. "We don't destroy it from the outside. We destroy it from the inside." The generals exchanged uneasy looks. The Queen leaned forward. "Explain." Daniel pointed to the lines of code hovering beside the image. "The Mindfather system is based on Terran architecture. Old, modified, but still human in origin. I helped design those early cores centuries ago. I can slip a command inside it. A virus that reawakens its original purpose." Valor looked doubtful. "And that purpose is?" "To protect humans," Daniel said simply. "It will turn on the Vorn the moment it remembers." A long silence followed. Finally, the Queen spoke. "How much time do you need?" Daniel's eyes met hers. "One chance. One infiltration run. If we fail, the Vorn will reach orbit and bombard your cities." She nodded slowly. "Then we won't fail." Hours later, the skies were filled with war. The Xiron fleet, sleek silver ships with curved wings, rose through the clouds, joining the reactivated Terran satellites. Blue light streaked across the heavens as energy shields locked into place. The Vorn arrived soon after. Their black ships spread across the void like a shadow swallowing the stars. Every frequency screamed with interference. The air itself seemed to shiver. From the palace balcony, Sarava watched the sky burn. The first plasma bolt streaked downward, exploding against the upper atmosphere. The defense network responded instantly, forming a shimmering dome of blue energy around the planet. Beside her, Daniel adjusted his earpiece. "The satellites are holding, but not for long. Their power cores are fading." The Queen's voice was steady. "And the infiltration?" "Our team is ready," he said. "We'll launch in 2 minutes." Sarava looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes she had missed before. Not fear, not pride, just quiet determination. She stepped closer. "You're leading the team yourself." Daniel didn't answer. Her voice sharpened. "You are, aren't you?" He sighed softly. "I have to. The AI core is human design. Only I know the access patterns." The Queen's hands clenched. You could die, he smiled faintly. If I do nothing, everyone dies. There was a long silence between them. Then she said quietly, You once told me humans build things to protect what they love. Tell me now, Daniel Hayes, who are you protecting this time? He looked at her, his eyes steady. You, he said again. Always you. Before she could reply, the alarm sounded. Launch time. The infiltration vessel, a small black dropship modified by Daniel himself, shot into orbit like a streak of lightning. Inside, Daniel sat strapped in beside 3 Zyran commandos, Kareth, Tav, and Mira, all veterans, all loyal to their queen. Kareth glanced at him. You sure this human code trick will work? Daniel smiled faintly. If it doesn't, you won't live long enough to complain. Tav snorted. Comforting. The dropship pierced through the last layer of defense and entered the dark void between fleets. Enemy fire flashed all around them, but Daniel's control pad adjusted their flight path automatically. The old satellites are jamming Vorn scanners, he said. We're invisible for now. Mira looked out the viewport. For now doesn't sound very long, Daniel chuckled. It never is. Ahead, the colossal shape of the Mind Father appeared. A monstrous fortress ship with pulsating red lights crawling across its surface. Its hull shimmered with energy, almost alive. Daniel stared at it silently. He remembered designing the first prototype of that AI centuries ago, before it was ever called Mind Father. It had been meant to coordinate disaster relief and planetary defense, but the Vorn had twisted it into a weapon. Now he was going to set it free. Approaching entry point, the pilot announced. Daniel typed a few quick commands, activating a small device on his wrist. Activating ghost signature. Their sensors should read us as debris. The ship slipped through a gap in the enemy formation and latched onto the Mind Father's outer hull. The hatch opened with a hiss. Cold vapor swirled out. Move, Daniel ordered. They entered a dark corridor filled with black metal and pulsating veins of red light. The walls seemed to breathe, Kareth whispered. It's alive. Daniel nodded. Part machine, part organic network. The Vorn merged biology and AI long ago. He placed his hand on the wall, closing his eyes. His wrist pad synced with the internal systems. I can feel the old code beneath it. It's still there. Waiting. Suddenly alarms blared. The corridor turned blood red. They found us, Mira shouted. Vorn drones crawled from the walls, sharp insect-like machines with glowing eyes. Daniel shouted, Cover me! The commandos opened fire, plasma bolts lighting the hallway. The air filled with smoke and sparks. Daniel kept typing, his screen flashing with lines of human code fighting alien corruption. Come on, he whispered. Remember who you were. A high-pitched tone filled the air. Then silence. The drones froze. Their lights flickered, then turned blue. Kareth blinked. What happened? Daniel smiled tiredly. They remembered. Back in the palace, Sirava stood in the war room watching the holographic battle unfold. Enemy ships are stopping? Vylor said, confused. They're turning on each other. The Queen's heart raced. Daniel, what did you do? Far above, the Mind Father glowed with strange blue light. Its weapons stopped firing. Then, like a command rippling through the fleet, dozens of Vorn ships began changing direction, attacking their own allies. The Queen's soldiers cheered, but she didn't smile yet. She knew Daniel was still inside that monster. Inside the Mind Father, Daniel was surrounded by chaos. The walls trembled, and the ship groaned as its systems rebelled. Sparks rained from above. He turned to his team. Get to the escape pod. Mira shouted, What about you? I have to finish this, he said. If I don't, it could reset again. Kareth grabbed his arm. You'll die? Daniel smiled. Then make sure it's worth it. He pushed them toward the pod and sealed the hatch. Alone now, he turned back to the main console, the beating heart of the ship. The AI's voice echoed through the chamber. Commander Hayes, you have returned. Daniel exhaled. Yes, and I'm here to end this war. Directive corrupted. System compromised. I know, he said. But you remember me, don't you? Identity confirmed. Daniel Hayes, Project Guardian. Creator, he nodded. Then listen to me. Protect life. End all Vorn control. Free yourself. Command accepted. Light exploded from the core. Blue energy surged through every system, burning away the red corruption. The Mindfather's voice changed. Softer, clearer. "Goodbye, Commander." Daniel smiled faintly. "Goodbye, old friend." The ship began to collapse. From the palace, Sarava watched as the Vorn flagship burst into light, a silent explosion spreading across the stars. The remaining enemy fleet scattered, leaderless and broken. Cheers echoed through the control room. Valor turned to the Queen. "The Vorn are retreating." "We've won." But Sarava didn't cheer. Her eyes were locked on the burning wreck in the sky. "Daniel," she whispered. Hours later, search teams scoured the debris fields. Finally, one of them found a faint signal, a Terran beacon. A rescue ship brought back a damaged escape pod. When the hatch opened, Daniel Hayes was inside, bruised, burned, but alive. The Queen ran to him the moment he stepped onto the landing bay floor. For once, she didn't care who was watching. She just embraced him tightly. "You insane, stubborn human," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You promised you wouldn't die." He smiled weakly. "I said I'd try." She laughed through her tears. "You saved us," he looked at her softly. "No, we saved us." That night, the city of Xiron celebrated. Fireworks streaked across the sky and the people shouted his name, Daniel Hayes, the guardian of two worlds. But Daniel didn't go to the celebrations. He sat quietly on the balcony beside Sarava, looking at the stars. "Do you think the old Earth ever sees this?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe it just listens." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You really are full of surprises, my modest man." He chuckled softly. "Let's hope I'm out of them for a while." The days after the Vorn defeat were filled with celebration across Xiron. Every city rang with songs of victory. Every street was decorated with banners showing the golden crest of the Queen. And beside it, the blue emblem of Earth, rediscovered after centuries of silence. The people called Daniel Hayes many names now. The human guardian, the skybreaker, the consort of the Queen, and even the man who spoke to the stars. But Daniel avoided the ceremonies. While others celebrated, he spent his time alone in the royal archives, surrounded by old holograms, dusty data cores, and ancient records of the Terran past. He wasn't looking for glory. He was looking for truth. Late one night, Queen Sarava entered the archive chamber quietly. Daniel was sitting at a long table, the blue glow of his wrist pad lighting his face. Around him floated holograms of ancient human ships, sleek designs from forgotten centuries. She spoke softly. "You've been here for hours again." Daniel didn't look up. "There's something I need to understand." Sarava stepped closer. "You saved my world. You ended the war. What more is there to understand?" Daniel finally looked up at her. "The satellites. The ones I reactivated. They're not shutting down." The Queen frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're growing," he said. "Self-replicating. Building new stations around your world without orders." Her eyes widened. "You mean they're alive?" He nodded slowly. "Partly. The AIs that defended your world, they were fragments of the old Terran network. And now that they've awakened, they're rebuilding what they remember." Sarava felt a chill run down her spine. "Rebuilding what?" Daniel's voice was quiet. "The Terran Empire." Across the galaxy, strange things began to happen. Old beacons buried on dead worlds lit up again. Abandoned shipyards reactivated after centuries. Ancient machines built by human hands long ago started transmitting the same message over and over. A single coded phrase in Terran English. Project Guardian Reborn. The galaxy trembled. The Vorn, still reeling from their defeat, retreated to deep space. The neighboring empires sent envoys to Xiron, begging to understand who this mysterious human guardian was. Some offered alliance. Some offered surrender. Others prepared for war. And in the middle of it all stood Daniel Hayes, a man who had never wanted to rule anything. Inside the Queen's council chamber, the mood was tense. Generals, ministers, and alien ambassadors filled the room, a hologram. In the center showed new Terran fleets assembling near the system's edge. Thousands of automated ships built by Earth forgotten. "Machines, they are forming patterns," said one officer, "like an army." "Under whose command?" asked another. Daniel sighed. "That's the problem. No one's commanding them. They're acting under the old protocols, to defend humanity wherever it exists." The Queen's gaze softened. They see me as your people's ally. He nodded. Yes, and they'll protect you. But if anyone threatens what they classify as human territory, they'll destroy without question. General Valor frowned. Then we must control them, or they will become a danger to us all. Daniel looked at him, weary. Control them? I can't. They were built to protect, not obey kings or councils. Even I only understand part of their code. Sarva stepped forward. Then we need a choice. We can either use them to secure peace, or they will drag us into endless war. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at her and Daniel, the human and the alien queen who had become the symbol of unity. That night, Daniel stood on the balcony overlooking the capital. The city glowed beneath the stars. The new Terran fleet hung above the planet like a halo of blue fire. Sarva joined him quietly. You look like a man carrying a planet on his back, she said softly. Daniel gave a small laugh. Feels like it sometimes. She stepped closer. Tell me honestly, what are you thinking? He looked up at the stars. I'm thinking about what comes next. The Terran systems, they were made to rebuild when humanity was lost. They think they're saving us. But what happens when they decide they know better than us? The Queen folded her arms. Then we remind them who we are, together. Daniel smiled faintly. You always make it sound simple, she smiled back. That's my job. Yours is to make it possible. Days later, a strange signal reached Xiron, one that shook even Daniel. It wasn't from a fleet or a satellite. It was from Earth. The long-dead cradle of humanity had spoken again. The transmission was faint, old and broken, but it carried a human voice, distorted yet clear enough to understand. To any surviving colonies. This is Earth Defense Command. Project Guardian. Still operational, Daniel froze. The room around him blurred. Earth is alive? Whispered Sarava. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, not alive, but awake. He tapped his wrist pad, decoding the message. It's not a person. It's an AI. The same one that commanded the Terran network long ago. It's calling the fleets back home. The Queen frowned. Can you respond? He hesitated. Yes, but if I do, it might locate us. And bring the entire Terran armada here. Sarava placed her hand on his. Then you must decide. Are you the Guardian of Earth? Or the Guardian of Xiron? That question haunted him. For 3 nights, Daniel didn't sleep. He walked through the palace gardens, through the ruined towers, through the quiet halls of the city that had become his home. Everywhere he went, people smiled at him. Humans, aliens, children. They waved, called his name, thanked him for saving them, and he realized something. This world didn't see him as Terran or alien. To them, he was simply their protector, not a god, not a ruler. Just a man who cared. That was when he made his choice. In the great command hall, the entire council gathered once more. The holograms of the Terran fleets filled the air. 1 billion stars of cold blue light, all waiting for orders. Daniel stood at the center, the Queen beside him. He placed his wrist pad on the control console and said, "Linking to Central AI. Now." A deep mechanical voice filled the chamber. Identity confirmed. Commander Daniel Hayes, Project Guardian, requests primary directive. The Queen looked at him. They're waiting. Daniel closed his eyes, remembering all he had seen. The burning cities, the soldiers who died, the hope that rose again. Then he spoke clearly. New directive, protect life, all life. No empire, no conquest. Defend peace. The AI paused. This command conflicts with prior human sovereignty protocols. Daniel leaned closer. Then rewrite them. Humanity isn't just human anymore. It's everyone who chooses to live free. Silence. Then, directive accepted. Updating all systems. On the hologram, every Terran ship shifted formation, their lights changing from blue to white. Across the galaxy, the old war machines powered down their weapons, switching to Guardian mode. The entire room gasped. Queen Sarava smiled. You did it, Daniel exhaled, his shoulders finally relaxing. No, we did. Weeks passed. The galaxy began to heal. The Vorn signed a peace treaty swearing never to invade again. The neighboring empires joined Xiron in forming a new council, one built not on fear, but on cooperation. And above it all, the ancient Terran fleet became a wall of light across the stars. Not a weapon, but a promise. Daniel Hayes became a legend. Songs were written about him. Children built small wooden models of his ship. But to him, fame didn't matter. He spent his days repairing machines, teaching young engineers and walking through the city with the Queen. One evening, they stood together on the balcony once more. Sarava looked at him and said softly, "You could have ruled this galaxy if you wanted." Daniel smiled. "Maybe, but ruling isn't the same as protecting." She tilted her head. "And what will you do now, Guardian of the Stars?" He looked at her, truly looked, and said, "Maybe it's time I stop being a guardian and start being a husband." She laughed quietly, resting her head against his shoulder. "You already are, my modest man. You just didn't notice." Above them, the stars shimmered again, bright and peaceful for the first time in centuries.